So this is the Nortent Varde one, my favourite tent of 2025, but for me it's not perfect. However, there are lots of things that I like about it, some things not so much. I thought today I'd go through some of the features, some of the specs, and yeah, let me know what you think. So I hadn't actually planned on making a video about this tent yet. I've had so many questions about it, and after all, it is a 4-season, it's cold weather winter tent, and it's that time of year. In fact, it's freezing today. I thought I'd answer pretty much all of the questions that I've had about it in this video, hopefully. I actually bought this tent as a raffle prize. I hadn't planned on keeping it. I set it up just to make sure everything was there, and wow, I thought it was a lovely tent. I sent a few pictures to the gaffer and she says, why don't you keep it if you like it? So I did. And it's been my go-to tent since, really. I'll start off by showing you the pack size. So it's quite a hefty beast. I always separate the poles from the tent, so this is the biggest chunk of the weight. In fact, the weight of this tent is going to probably put quite a few people off. Although, it does pack down reasonably small. I can get this into the top of my backpack, but the weight of the tent and the poles without the bag or without the tent pegs is 2.8 kilograms, which for a winter tent I don't actually think is too bad. So one of the other questions that I've been asked quite a lot is, how much did it cost to get this shipped to the UK? So I bought direct from Nortent. On their website at the time, it cost me £411. £40 in shipping, which was, I think it was trackable, it was DHL, something like that. I've got a screenshot of it all. £54 in duty, and then £101 in VAT and taxes. So a total of £606. It only took 3 days, I think, to come from buying it. Third day later, it arrived. Let's get it set up. So they describe this as a 1.5 person tent, which means basically a roomy tent where you've got plenty of room inside for your gear. It's a freestanding tent as well. One of the reasons I really like it is it's so easy to pitch in the wind. I put a little orange tag on there so I know which way to pitch it up. My first complaint, really, so these are the pegs that come with the tent. They are lightweight. I think they weigh 6 or 8 grams or something like that, but they are just not long enough for, really what they want, a bomb-proof 4-season shelter. You can actually buy extra pegs which are larger than this. They do one that's twice the weight, 16 grams I think, they're called Stronghold, and then one that's 24 grams, which they call heavy duty. But I tend to use my own pegs with all of my tent setup, so these are the ones that I go for. I think these are Eastern, I think they're 9-inch or 10-inch stakes, but your tent is only as strong as the pegs that's holding it into the ground. So I use these smaller ones just for holding the the tent to the ground, and then the longer ones I use for the guy lines. We've only got a little bit of a breeze today. If it was really windy, I would peg everything out first at the bottom and then add the poles. In fact, I will just peg the bottom 6 out. It actually makes it easier for setting up the tent. So each of the tie-out points has got this reinforced webbing, and then you've got this heavy duty bit which is reinforced for the pole sleeves. There we go, it's some sort of octagonal shape with different sizes. So Nortent have upgraded their poles from previous tents. They've gone for some 9.6mm DAC NSL poles, featherlight poles. Pretty much the best you can get. There's 4 of these, they're colour coded, 2 with a black end and 2 with a bright blue end. You've also got to be careful as well that you properly seat these together. Sometimes people put the poles in and there's a gap like that, and that can damage your poles and create a weak point. But if you've seen my recent video, this tent took a bit of a beating and perfectly fine. I put the the longer poles in first, which are the black colour coded. They just fit into the sleeve. Make sure it seats right down to the bottom, and that goes to the opposite corner. So as I mentioned, these pole sleeves are reinforced, and they are big enough so you can double pole this tent if you want to. If you want belts and braces, you can buy extra poles. I don't know how much they cost. And I put the blue poles in afterwards, clearly marked up. So these ones don't go crossways, they go opposite. You can actually check which way it goes just by following the seam. Takes it right over to that one there. So it's round about at this point where I've got the poles in. That would start to guide the tent out. But these ones you need to bend a little bit more, but just be careful with it. Don't bend it too sharply, just enough to get it in the sleeve. So you can see it's starting to blow a little bit now, although we've not got high winds. So yeah, I would start guying things out around the lower end. I'm not going to put every guy line out today. So they've got these little toggles to hold the guy lines in. It's really handy, just keeps things nice and neat. So it's for the actual guy lines that I use these longer pegs. These are what are going to properly hold the tent in place. So just a bungee on there, so once you're hanking them up at the end, you can just keep everything tidy. Loosen it off, guy your tent out. I'm just going to guy out the front guy lines today. I think that's one of the issues when it comes to the weight. You need a lot of tent pegs to fully guy this out. Normally I would guy around all around the outside, then I'd start to build the tent up from below. So these just clip on here. It's really easy. Let me show you one of those. Just work your way around the tent from bottom to the top. I wouldn't go straight to the top here. It's quite difficult as well, and that's when you start to put more strain on individual poles and things. Once you get to there is a layer that has got some more guy lines on it, and that's when I would guy the tent out even more. So the tent has grown another foot or so now. We've got another level of guy lines, but there's a lot of attention to detail gone here. So we've got a long pole sleeve here to give structure lower down, and then there's a seam that goes all the way along the pole clips. But also, these pole clips, they alternate. So one goes around one way, and then the next one goes around the other way. So that sort of levels things up a little bit, balances things out, and it makes the shear stresses on where these points are much stronger. Nortent recommends is either wrapping it round the pole or wrapping it through itself and around the pole. So what that does is it's joining. It's going to be a bit of synergy or whatever it's called. It's joining the pole and the outer fly together. So it's just spreading loads across more than one area. So it's just making it more robust in total. Either get a fresh peg, so 2 pegs and 2 guy lines is stronger than 2 guy lines and 1 peg. But you can double up. Now I could do this all the way around, but let's just get this clipped up because it's not really windy now. Although it's freezing. So the further up the tent you go, the tighter these get. You do need to put a little bit brute force and ignorance on here just to get them all on. But if you've got everything from the ground up, you don't bend your poles. There we go. I think that's everything. You do have to go around and check because I always miss some. Thought I'd done it. I'm just going to take a quick moment to thank Squarespace for sponsoring the video today. So if you don't know who Squarespace are, they're the #1 place to go if you want to have a go at building a website all by yourself. So before we created our websites, we were really scared that you had to spend thousands of pounds to get somebody who knew stuff about web design and coding to sort something out for you. But Squarespace makes it really easy. All you need to do is choose one of their ready-made templates, upload your own photos, add some text, drag things around a little bit, and within a couple of hours we had a website up and running. We use Squarespace to create our domain names like messner.co.uk. Jo uses her website for selling her artwork and her paintings. The built-in e-commerce thing, it's really easy to use. It takes care of all the payments for you. I mainly use my website for sharing my YouTube videos and online raffles, as well as sending out newsletters. You can also check out the analytics to see where all your traffic's coming from. The feature list goes on and on. So if you fancy having a go at building a website of your own, if you click the link in the description below or head over to squarespace.com/Paul Messner, you'll get a totally free trial, and when you're ready to go live, you'll get 10% off your first purchase. This is one of those tents, just by looking at the geodesic design, that it is sturdy. You know, you can proper push on this tent and it's not really going anywhere. As I said, if you've got really small pegs in there, potentially at some point they could pull out, so longer pegs are better for me. It is a gorgeous looking tent. So for this type of tent, Nortent like to use silicon coated ripstop nylon, silicon coated both sides. So a lot of other, I'm going to say cheaper, but it's not all cheaper tents. So you look at tents like the QU Storm Star that everybody likes at the moment. Now that's silicon coated on the outside but PU coated on the inside, which isn't as strong, it isn't as durable, isn't as flexible or dynamic as double coated sil nylon. This is the stronger nylon 66 version. Good quality YKK zippers on there as well. But sil nylon tents do have their downsides. They tend to, you know, when it comes to changing temperature and humidity, and even when they get wet, you know, the material can stretch a tiny little bit, so you have to maybe add a little bit of tension to your guy lines after a couple of hours, or maybe check them a couple of times throughout the night. And that water can actually, you know, stay soaked into the material, so when you come to pack away, you know, the nylon fly is retaining some of the water as well. But exactly the same can be said about, you know, the silicon PU coated tents as well. The sil poly tents, Dyneema tents, Dyneema doesn't hold any water really, so you can just wipe it down, but it's a very different type of material. My preference is sil nylon, but it's each to their own. So I mentioned earlier I put a little orange tag on this corner of the tent, so that lets me know to put this end of the tent into the wind, and because of that I use this as my main entrance, so then everything is protected from the wind coming this way. This tent has got a little bit of a trick up its sleeve. It's got two doors. I'll show you the problem with this. So if the wind was coming from that direction, or you didn't care which way you set it up, and you wanted to use this door, that is fine, but you know, the closed bit of the inner door is here, so the entrance is over there, so you've got to like crawl right in just to get it to open so you can get inside the tent. So it's much easier to get in and out through the other door. Although, you know, it's a nice to have if I had my backpack here and I wanted to just get to some gear. I could live without this door. All it's doing is adding a little bit of extra weight. One door's enough for me, although some people might like the option. Also, if the wind is blowing this way on, I found that this storm flaps. I've got a bit of a sniffle. Yeah, so it flaps and it vibrates in the wind, so it is quite noisy. So another reason why just the one door would be enough for me. I suppose we better have a little goosey inside though. So the zips are pretty good. They do sometimes catch on this storm flap. Much easier if you use two hands. I have got two of these little bungee retainers, so that means it's really easy to keep your door tied back. Elastic on there as well. Really easy, not with gloves on, even though it's a finger hole glove. Ready for some new ones. I'm gonna have to take these off, aren't I? Just too cold to not have them on now. This is a lot of the problem with winter camping. So if your hands are freezing cold, it makes doing just simple tasks a lot more difficult. The first thing you might notice is just how big this porch area is, or vestibule, whatever you want to call it. I could probably lie down in that. In fact, I'm going to lie down in that just to show you how large it is. I could zip up and be fully laid down in this. So in a pinch, if you need to shelter someone from the storm, they can kip in this bit. There's a decent amount of space between the inner and the outer. Obviously if it's really windy you're going to get points that touch, but I'm not sure if this is DWR coated, but having an inner certainly helps in the cold weather. And you've got the choice of solid, or I'll show you in a second. You can unzip this so you've got a mesh door, but just look at how much space there is in here. The door pretty much opens all the way. Massive opening, isn't it? You can sit proper spread out. There's decent headroom. So in the centre, if it does angle down a little bit, I don't know which you prefer. Would you prefer to have a little bit more inner space and a little bit less porch space? Just look at that, it is huge. But having a slightly smaller inner means it's easier to heat it up with your body heat in the winter. So let me show you this. There we go. So if you want a little bit more ventilation, you can, if you want, just have this halfway. There we go. Half and half, or even just a little bit at the top. So you've got a couple of choices with this door. There are the toggles on here to tie it back, or there's a pocket here, which is a storage pocket, but just shove the door in, that's what I do. So the external height of the tent is 105 centimetres and it's 100 centimetres on the inside. Lengthwise I think it's 240 long inside. I did write it down, I think. Yeah, 240 centimetres long, end to end. The width from corner to corner there is 60 centimetres, but this section in the middle from here to the edge there is 105 centimetres. So there's plenty of room there for your gear. A couple of these little pockets. Washing line as well. Quite like these storage pockets up top for your phone, or you can put a lantern or your head torch facing downwards in there. So you haven't got to be clipping stuff on. So I found that this is a really comfortable place to be. Yeah, there's lots of room inside for you and your gear, for one person definitely. So in a push, you could squeeze two in here. You won't get two sleeping pads in here. You can get a wide sleeping pad in. I've not had long and wide in it yet, but I've done a regular wide and that fits in here no problem at all. I would quite like a slightly larger door, but you know, they are restricted just from the way that the pole structure is. But there are two of them, and you know, if the weather is really nice, you can open both doors. You can vent both doors. So I've got one open, one vented there. There's like a wire mesh in that. Not wire mesh, a piece of wire in there just to hold that up. You can zip all the way down if you wanted to, but I wouldn't use that for getting in and out. So something I found out by accident last camp is, you know, these are glow in the dark, so you can find them if you need to get out in a hurry. You just have to shine your torch on them for a bit and it stay luminous for quite a long time. Another big size pocket there. You could have more pockets. You could have less pockets. You know, it's a heavy-ish tent already for some people. Not for me. I like it. I was very pleasantly surprised by this tent. It has got a little trick up its sleeve that is it a gimmick? I don't know. It's not something that I will ever use, and there is a reason behind that, which I'll explain. In fact, I've never used it. I've never even tried it. in the setup, but I'll have a go for the first time in a second just to show you. Let me know what you think. It involves these little tension straps. So this could do with actually tightening up a bit. There we go. And that one. So the zips don't have them little clips at the bottom, but they do have bungees, so if you want to peg them out, you can do that. All of these tie-outs are reinforced with Dyneema. Bungees on some of them. So another question that I've been asked a lot is condensation. What is it like? So first time, I had virtually no condensation at all, but I did have these vents open, and I had a little bit of the mesh of the door, but the last camp it was freezing. It was chucking it down with rain and blowing a gale, and I had everything zipped up, which was probably a mistake, and I got a little bit of condensation on the fly sheet, but also in here, everything was zipped up and it couldn't breathe properly. So I had some dew on my quilt as well. So I thought we'll have a look at some of the venting options. Obviously you can have an outer door open. If it's not too windy and it's not too wet, you can get away with it. But for the most part, you're just going to have a couple of these vents open, allowing a cross bit of ventilation in there. With it being a 4-season tent, the fly sheet comes right down to the floor, but Nortent supply you with a little spares bag, a repair bag, and there's something in there which helps out with the ventilation. So the spares bag comes with quite a comprehensive little bit of stuff. So we've got stuff, not very technical is it? We've got an instruction manual, tells you how to pitch the tent, a few specs about the tent, stuff like that. Those blokes tend not to read the instructions though, don't we? There are a couple of patches as well. So there is a patch for the inner tent and the patch for the outer tent. There doesn't come with any seam sealing glue, so if you want to seam seal the tent, although I can confirm that the tent does not leak. We had a mega downpour. The bottom of the tent was flooded. What I mean by that is this surrounding area was flooded, but this bathtub floor it's got a 10,000mm hydrostatic head, and it was bone dry inside. There was no water getting through whatsoever. This is a 3,000mm hydrostatic head, by the way, and with it being silicone coated both sides, nothing's getting through that. And all these seams are stitched in such a way that they are they've got the thread that expands. They've also got, when they manufacture it, they use a specific cool down needle so that the holes just shrink after they've been sewn. So you end up with a very waterproof shelter. So also in here we've got these little bungees with clips on. I will show you what they're for in a second. And then there's a couple of extra guy lines, which I've put just a couple of these little carabiners on them, just because they're quite handy if you just want to clip them on quickly. I'm going to borrow one of them for this vent. I'm actually going to borrow two of these because I'm going to set both of them up. So there's little bungees on here, like this. I'm just going to put a carabiner on to the bungee. I'm not sure if you can see it very well, but there are some bungees here on these larger panels. So I'm going to clip this bungee onto this little bungee to bungee, and then you can pull this up and put the clip up on the tent on the top there, and that just lifts that up, and that allows airflow to get through to the lower level of the tent. Put the other one on the opposite side. They've got these on the doors as well, so you could just go that far opposite. We've just got air being able to get into the tent now. Yeah, they've got them on the door as well, so you could lift that up like that. Nice little feature. Take that off. Too cold for that much ventilation, isn't it? Right, let's have a look at the feature that everybody seems to be raving about. I'm not sure whether, is it a gimmick, is it really clever? I don't know. It's not something that I see being used on a 4-season tent. This is a cold weather winter shelter where you want to batten down the hatches and stay warm. But I have been wrong before. So we'll give it a go for the first time. I've not seen it, well, I've seen it done on someone's video, so I don't know. I've seen it done once, so we'll have to have a look, see if I can get it to work. You need to open both doors. I think you need to open both doors anyway. I need to warn you that this is for a calm weather situation only. If it's windy, you do not want to be doing this, or you will lose, damage, destroy your tent. But if it's gorgeous, there's not a breath of wind, you might like this. I'm going to take out these guy lines, top ones anyway. So it's not windy, remember. We'll do the bottom ones as well. I don't know if you need some guy lines. We shall see how it fares. Right, we need to look at these sections now. So there are 2 little buckles on each edge here. So unclip those. 1. Cold hands again. There we go. Oh, you can see where this is going already. Look. Starting to open up quite nicely, that. And then I think you take a couple of clips off here. These 2 here, from what I can gather. There we go. Got those 2 spare guy lines out of my little repair kit. I'm going to clip them onto here. Don't know if you need to do that or not, but that's what I'm doing. It looks logical. A couple of these longer pegs. Just guide these out a little bit just to support it, and just to pull this little bit out. Just looks wrong like that, doesn't it? So we'll pull it out. Now the tent is in I don't know what it's called. I'm going to call it gazebo mode. You could, tie these out of the way. I suppose it's a good time to show you how these bungees work so well. Just hang things up. Shove it through the bungee. Tighten it up. Nice and tidy. So what do you reckon to gazebo mode? Is it going to be handy, or is it a bit of a gimmick? I don't know of many situations where you're going to be using a really robust, storm-worthy tent designed for cold weather where you're going to want gazebo mode. If I'm going to be in those kind of conditions, I'm going to take a tent that is more designed for gazebo conditions. That's just my thinking. I suppose if you've only got the money for one tent and you plan on using it all year round, and if they design a mesh inner for this so it can make it more of a 3-season tent, might be a pretty cool feature. I reckon I'm going to be using something like the X-Dome or my Enan in the nicer weather. The X-Dome you can open right up, although it doesn't have this little porch thing. Wonder how much coverage that gives if it's actually raining, because it looks like your door area is protected by these, which is clever design work again. And I wonder if they thought about this when they designed it, or whether it was by accident. Unless you get in sideways wind in there, but you could probably open the door a little bit as well, couldn't you? Or close the door a little bit. In fact, just because I can, I'm going to try that to see if just zipping this down a bit helps at all. Maybe not. Not covered things up much more. Yeah, as you can see, this is if you get a big gust of wind, that is taking your tent off the mountain. I suppose we want to see what the view's like. It makes it easy for getting in and out. Panoramic views, look. I'm almost certain I'm never going to use this, but for some people it might be a nice option. Let me know in the comments what you think. So as I said right at the beginning, I bought this tent on a whim. Never planned on buying one for myself. It was just for a raffle prize. But something about it that I really, really like, and it's now my favourite tent at the moment. For the moment anyway, it has dethroned my Hilleberg Unna. In fact, I've got, you know, a Tarp 5 Hilleberg to go with the Unna that I've had for 6 or 8 weeks. I've not been out in it because, you know, I'm just loving using this tent, although not bothered about gazebo mode. So the things that I really like about it is easier to put up. The way that it's got the, you know, the exoskeletal pole system, you can peg it out low to the ground and put it up in windy conditions, no bother at all. The space inside is awesome. Loads of room inside, plenty of storage options. It's just a really comfortable place to be in. And you know, this porch area is just massive. It is just so good for cooking, for storing your gear. The quality of the tent, superb. You know, I know that I don't want to do real comparisons to Hilleberg tents, but it's on a par, I think, with the machining and the manufacturing. I don't know, I can't testify to the material strengths and things like that, but it's strong enough for me. As you can see, it's pretty versatile as well. It's got multiple options for pitching, although I do need to see how easy it is to put that back together again. As I said, I don't think I'll be using this. Clip them in. That was easy enough, wasn't it? And these two. It's also perfect for UK conditions because it's, as I'm doing, pitching inner and outer both together. You know, all of your inner is going to stay dry while you're pitching up in the rain, and you know you're going to get rain over here. I'm trying to think off the top of my head, you know, what I can compare this tent to. So the other night I was out with Andy, and he was in a Hilleberg Sulu, and despite the torrential conditions, the wind and the rain, both tents were still standing. I had a little bit more room than Andy. His tent weighed a little bit less than mine. This is half the price nearly of the Hilleberg though. We're talking 600 shipped to the UK for this, whereas the Hilleberg's now 1,050, 1,040 pounds, something like that. It's a very similar quality tent. DAC poles, high tensile, silicon coated nylon, all reinforced on the edges and Dyneema down the bottom. I mentioned earlier the Kuiu Storm Star, which hasn't got as premium materials as this, so that's around 600, 650 pounds. It weighs a little bit less than this, I think, 2.4 kilos. I know which I'd prefer, although that is a two-person tent. I would have this every day of the week, but personal preference. You have to choose what is best for you, don't you? So I wasn't expecting to fall in love with another tent, but you know what, I have. This is brilliant. I've got no affiliation with Nortent at all. I bought this with my own money. Think I will invest in the proper footprint for it though. And I'd love to see them make a slightly smaller version of this, with one door, you know, not quite as much vestibule space, you know, a little tiny limpet that you can stake down onto the top of a mountain, little bit smaller footprint, but I do like the room in this as well. So it's swings and roundabouts in there. It's little things like these little bungee retainers and stuff like that. Attention to detail. So I have owned the Verne 1 tent before as well, and I feel that this is quite a big step up from the Verne 1. Not quality wise, but just the way that it's designed and its sturdiness. It's just better. But this is a little bit more expensive than that as well, I think. I can't remember the exact price of the Verne. What do you think? It's not going to be far off before the sun goes down, so I'm going to get this packed away, get off home. Hope you found the video useful. Thank you for watching. See you next time.